Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast, where we discuss the career paths of leaders in the energy, utility, and construction fields to better understand the habits, routines, and mindset that has built these successful men and women. I'm your host, Brad Coleman. It took me 20 years to understand my strengths. My goal is to identify the common traits of leaders in our industry to provide you with the tools you need to be successful in a fraction of that time. Thank you for listening. For more information on these guests and others, please come find me on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening. For more information on these guests and others, please come find me on LinkedIn. Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast. My name is Brad. I'm your host. This is where we break down the expertise of professionals in the construction and utility industries. Those of us that have been around for a little while, so we can extract some of the lessons learned and pathways that we took to get here to maybe help get some ideas and clear up the path a little bit for younger people in the industry and give them some encouragement about how none of our paths are necessarily a straight line, very linear in our careers. Today, I'm joined here with Steve Wieczorek. He is primarily with Washington Gas up in the DC area. Been with them for several years, but he's also the founder of the Pipeline Safety Management Systems Group, which is regulatory information on pipeline and regulatory safety within the natural gas industry. Steve, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Tell us a little bit about your background, particularly your time with Washington Gas and your career progression, and also the PSMS Group.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Washington Gas. This is my 16th year. I actually came in a safety role, so I was occupational safety specialist. I just come from supporting Homeland Security. And so that was 2008. I spent about 6 years in that team and really supporting kind of all facets of the business within construction and operations. So everything from gas supply, like our gates, all the way through the crews that were fixing broken lines. I had a chance to work on a lot of great initiatives, bring compliance up to another level, work on continuous improvement and management systems. And then I had an opportunity to move into my current role or department, and that was quality management, when they decided to stand up a program, a more formalized quality management program ahead of kind of an intersect with PSMS. And I've been in that role in that area since 2014. And so now I'm essentially responsible for quality management systems for an operator that has about 1.3 million customers in the DC metro area. I've primarily focused on continuous improvement within our construction and our operations activities.
Okay.
The group, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. Tell us a little bit about the group.
So the way that came about is the PSMS LinkedIn group is API RP 1173, which is a standard or recommended practice out of the American Petroleum Institute. It is designed around safety management systems for the pipeline industry. They published their first edition of the recommended practice in 2000. And straight away, a lot of the trade associations like SGA, AGA, they started to jump on board with developing pilot teams, operators that wanted to get proactively involved. There were a couple lead operators at that time because they had more recent, more public issues. And so they were taking the lead on developing tools to implement the 1173. And at the time, within Washington Gas, we didn't have a formalized PSMS team. And so I was asked to join in the effort as the closest thing, because as I manage quality management systems, really the underlying fundamental principles of any sort of management system is guided around continuous improvement and kind of QMS, really. It just changes based on particular need, whether it's IT or AI or whatever the case may be. And so I got involved in all the AGA pilots and the testing and kind of helping implement some things within our organization before we had a formalized team. And then, of course, once we had a formalized team, they took over day-to-day operations. But I have a big part in the implementation I started the group in 2018 because I felt like my experience with trade associations has been great. There's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved and be engaged in activities that improve the industry, make us safer, more reliable. But what I found over the years, especially working in occupational safety and working so close with the crews out in the field, is that if you don't start there, right, with the crews that are actually doing the work, the hard stuff, right, the rest of us get to sit behind a desk, then you're really not going to have buy-in for any sort of initiative or management system or program that you're trying to instill. And so and this is a borrowed phrase, but I said, we have plenty of boardroom representation. I put that in quotes, right? And everyone from middle management on up. What we need is the basement. So we need representation from the top, the corner office, all the way down to the street. So I thought, what better way to put a group together is to use a huge social media platform, create a group, and just as long as you're invested and you're interested and you work in some sort of way with PSMS, then you're welcome to come in and join. And we certainly had everyone from helpers that are just, they basically dig holes all day, right, for the foreman to assemble pipe, all the way up to executives and kind of household names within the industry.
How big is that LinkedIn group now?
I usually know the number off the top of my head. If I had to take a wild guess, it's I think 2357, somewhere around there. So it's approaching 2,400 members.
Okay.
It's a niche. It's a niche within a niche almost, really. It's a specialty. But yeah, we're intentional in how we grow. We represent all parts of the industry, so services, suppliers, obviously operators, contractors, and everything. Everyone's welcome. We just try to weed out the folks that just want to come in and drop ads, basically. So.
Right. That's what everybody's fighting with these days, I think.
Yeah.
And that was going to be my next question was going to be, what's the general makeup of the group? But it sounds like it's very vast. So is it primarily used as an educational resource for those that need to learn more about it to take back to implement in their own day-to-day work?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it's mostly made up of certainly utilities sector representatives. And again, they identify as being in the utility space. There's the broader oil and gas sector, and then there's everyone else, which is really the consultants, the suppliers, the services, that sort of thing, which is a vital part. And contractors, particularly since the contractors do most of the work, usually, especially when we're talking about new business. We have 5 main channels that we use for not only for education, but for engagement. We have what we call our table events. And those are what you would consider more of like a presentation, right? It's someone that's coming in who's an expert in some particular capacity, whether it's safety or continuous improvement or management systems or whatever the case may be. We've had a whole wide range, some that you might not think were linked to implementation of management systems, but that's the purpose, is to give people a wide array. So typically those are like presentations. Then we have pop-ups, which is really our new feature. And those are opportunities for quick, short workshop style events. A lot of those, actually most this year, have been designed around the tools that API has been pushing out for implementation, whether it's for operators or contractors, right? Those are free tools, and so we've been implementing there. There's certainly the feed, which is the actual, just like with the personal LinkedIn feed, it's that area where everyone kind of engages, they post, and we hope for lots of engagement there. We expect that people, I probably lost count. Oh no, I forgot one, but I'll go back to it. It's probably one of the more thrilling ones. And so one of the final ones is that we expect people to come into the group, maybe not always engage, because as we've talked about, there's a lot of people that come into LinkedIn. They look a lot, and they tend to be called lurkers, but they don't really engage. We've heard from members, anecdotally, just through stories, that we know they engage within the group with other contacts, and they make all of their transactions kind of, they talk to consultants, they talk to services or whatever offline. And so we know that's happening. They just don't necessarily, and I wish they would come back and say, hey, we actually connected. But we've heard that a lot, which is, hey, we actually used the group as a pivot point to meet someone who was doing this, they introduced us to someone else, and that person helped us with our implementation journey, whatever our struggle or successes, getting to that next level. And then the last one, but certainly not least, is we have a one-of-a-kind opportunity for operators and for contractors. It's called the Practice Exchange. It was born out of the idea of creating a space to share best practices within the industry, and it through a lot of other ideas coming in as we scaled the group, it morphed into this event where we have 9 leaders, thought leaders within the industry of all different facets, and a lot of these folks, most people recognize as kind of household names within, like, they're well-respected people within their particular expertise. And this is an opportunity for operators or contractors to come in and actually get one-on-one time, more or less, with the panel, either privately or through an actual public event, to ask them, hey, I'm just getting started. I need some help. I'm trying to convince my leadership, my executives, that this is the right thing to do. Whether you think it's above and beyond, or whether you think it's going to be a compliance issue at some point down the road. And then you have more seasoned operators that are way down the path of maturity, but they need that edge to get to the next level. And this is really like an executive kind of council. I mean, this is really a group of people that have so much expertise that they've probably seen it. And if not, they can answer the question. It's hard to get people engaged in that particular opportunity, but it's free. And people just need to be, I guess, courageous enough to step up. And it's tough. It's tough when people don't want to really air their problems, right?
Just for that last one that you mentioned, it is probably, I could see as being extremely valuable for the purpose of the industry and just those coming up that feel like maybe they're operating on an island sometimes within their own organization of trying to figure out how to implement these things. Or it ties back in a lot with the things that we talk about here on the podcast with regard to finding mentors, or, I mean, it's another application of that, right? I mean, who wouldn't love to have a room full of people that every time they face a new challenge in their life or their career, to be able to turn to them and say, hey, I haven't seen this before, or how would you approach this? It's one of my reasons for doing a lot of what I do in terms of talking about it on LinkedIn and the podcast and all, is because when I was in my early 30s trying to figure things out in my career and work life, I'm thinking, how are all these guys that are 10, 15 years older than me managing the career and the family, the spouse, the bills and the payments and stuff? And why aren't we talking about these sorts of things? And it's like, now I'm trying to be more proactive about helping those out that on the situations that I've already been through, that I've already seen.
Yep.
And I have conversations about people coming to the group to feel more comfortable about saying, I don't know how to do this, or how do I do this? I think that we could all benefit as a society from being able to have more of those conversations. And sorry to take it a lot more meta than maybe you intended it necessarily, but I think that it works on a larger scale and across all applications in our life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think, some of this is humility. I mean, it's just saying, how much do you want it? There's a lot of organizations that talk about they want to be the best, or they just want to be better every day. Well, it takes another level of commitment. That's why I mentioned to someone, there's a lot of leaders, there's a lot of people that can lead the way. You can lead from anywhere. I mean, the person that's just coming in the door as you're trying to help out, they can lead from their cube, from their drop-in desk or whatever. They can totally lead in their sphere of influence and make a difference. But it takes the act of actually doing it. So there's a lot of people that talk about it. You can probably name on 2 hands the number of books that have been written by just iconic leaders. They stand out for a particular reason, right? There's obviously more books out there, but the average person could probably name, 8 or 10. Well, not everyone is really suited for it, and they get stuck in a situation, an organization where they're dealing with resource constraints. It's no different than managing your life and managing kids and your spouse, as you said. But when you're in that spot and you're dealing with, hey, we want to get better, you have to decide how important is it to you. Again, one of the big motivations for me starting the group was because I knew that the industry could do better. I am generally impatient when it comes to improvement. I want to see it faster. So I think we can iterate a lot faster. And so I kind of sense that too within the industry. I said, you know what, we should be doing this. And there's a lot of personal and professional events in my past that gave me the kind of motivation to say, like, we should be working on this harder. Like, we should be doing more.
Yeah. How much of doing big things like you're talking about at such monumental levels is taking hold of the opportunity or seeing the need? And how much of it is just the ability to step into the role to lead that when you do see the opportunity? I mean, because you had to do both, right? You saw a need, but then also there's that personal standpoint where you also had to take the step toward that leadership and be the one to step out first and
Yeah.
say, we need this, I'm going to lead it.
Yeah, I think, and this is cliche, but we all have a capacity to do great things. And it doesn't mean that we can show up 100% all the time in everything. And that's why we tend to have our own specialties. We're like, oh, this is what I'm really into. And I can really focus all my energy on that. And I may not be great at picking up the house or whatever, right? We can't do it all in every moment. But to your point, I think that when you see an opportunity in it, it intersects with something that is very internal to how you operate, then I don't want to go as far as saying you have a responsibility, but I will say I felt like I was in a position to say, this is not one of those situations where I'm going to say, why isn't someone doing something about this? Instead, I said, I should be doing something about this. And I think
Hmm.
that if, again, this is not a judgy thing, but I think that in many cases, if more people did that, and it doesn't mean you know what's going to happen or that it's going to work out, but you just decide, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And so you're holding yourself. There's a phrase out there, 100% accountability, zero excuses, right? You're saying that this should be better. And you could sit back and just say, why isn't this better? And you could do that for years. Or you can decide to step up. And it's not everyone's role. Like, the universe doesn't necessarily put that in your hands. Sometimes it takes someone to step up and be the first one, and then other people will follow. And honestly, I didn't know what was going to happen. Towards the end of the year, I just felt like this is not going anywhere because I was just begging people to get involved. I had one of my peers. I was like, look, I just want to get to 50 members. I don't know why 50 made a difference to me. I was like, please, would you just join and then I'll leave you alone? And now the number isn't that important. It's a representative of what we're doing, but it's not terribly important. And I only give my credit for two things. One is deciding I should be the one to do something about it, and then not giving up after that first year. Because the next, like 4 months later, is when the industry actually took off. And that's when AGA, all their executives said, okay, all of our member operators will be on the journey within the next 3 years. So that statement came out the following spring, and that kind of just started everything off. That's when people started to engage because they were looking for resources.
Right. And so those circumstances, I mean, if you hadn't started,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't have been in such a good place at that moment whenever the opportunity presented itself for that takeoff. But did you also find, you kind of referenced it when you said sometimes we just kind of have to take ownership of it and go first. Did you find that there were others, going back to the lurkers, just in everyday life? Sometimes I think people are just looking for somebody to go first and they're just nervous. They're happy to join in. They want to join in. They want to participate. They just don't want to be the ones to go first. Did you find, even though the growth might have been slow at first, were there some that when you said, I'm doing this, were all about supporting you and wanting to jump in? And even if it took a little while for everybody to come on board?
Yeah, I think once people found out about it, it took a little while. And there's a couple names that are, again, household names in the industry. And a lot of these are, I'm very grateful, are friends of mine at this point. And once they caught on, they're so into it. It is like a circle within a circle. It's these are the folks, like, they live and breathe this stuff. And so they will basically do anything to get more involved and to help move the industry along. And so once they discovered that the group was there, then they were like, yeah. As far as I was hearing, like, there's nothing else out there like this right now. Like, we just we want to do anything and kind of help out.
No, I applaud you for being the one to go first like that for sure. And it's funny how you said now the numbers don't even matter to you as much anymore. I think that our metrics change and our expectations change a lot of times, but at some point it's like you need that to kind of get over the hurdle of I'm going to do this until. I heard an interview with Tim Ferriss where he said on his first podcast, he said, "Look, I'm just doing 10. I'm just if I can just do 10." And he's like, "That's the bare minimum." And then obviously I think he's on several hundred
Yeah,
now
yeah,
after 10 years or so, but you just need something to get started to say I'm going to at least try this minimal amount of effort before I give up on it, just to try to give it some traction. And I think that's great. I think that's kind of what your 50 barrier initially did, until now it's to the point where the thing is it's living and breathing on its own, and you appreciate it for what it is and the benefit that it brings because it's starting to produce fruit a little more now that you can see it.
yeah. I wanted to create value. The best thing, and if someone asked me not too long ago about work-life balance, I don't have a ton of hobbies. I got kids, and so we do everything that they're doing. But if I can find that space where I enjoy doing something and it intersects with my work, and when I'm not at work, it doesn't feel like work, right? It feels like I'm providing some sort of value, then that is like I couldn't ask for any more, really. I mean, it's
Yeah.
surpassed all of my expectations at this point. And I've met people who have, 500,000 people in their groups. And it's just a different market, right? We're obviously,
Right.
as I mentioned, it's a niche within a niche. And so that's why you mentioned like with the numbers, it's more about making sure that we're intentional about who
Yeah.
is in the group, because I'm always looking for that next person who's going to be a champion. And this is really no different. It mirrors what you would do in an organization. So within my programs at work, I'm always looking for those people that are like, they're interested, they ask questions, they're intrigued, and it seems like they will go the extra mile to talk about what you're doing and help push the message out there in a positive way. When you're always looking for those sort of things when you're implementing management systems or any sort of program, because you can never have enough resources. And so, since everything is decentralized to a certain degree, you need people out in the different areas, operational areas, to help. It's no different within the group. It's a vast space. There's a lot of people that are interested, but I'm always looking for that next person who's willing to step up and give us just a little bit more. And whether that's sharing our posts, talking about it when they go out to conferences, just introducing people to it. You could be doing everything offline. I feel like the universe has a way of rewarding everyone anyway. And so I think that somehow that'll come back and it'll help. I mean, if you're off doing your own thing and you just come in and learn something and then take it back to your organization, it's all good with me. That's exactly what it's there for. It's for people who want to get involved, all the way down to people that just want to come in and grab, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. We should
Yeah.
try that.
Continue that parallel then to the organization. What does it mean when you have somebody that comes in and they're eager to help and to serve and they're curious and they seem to want to directly get involved? What does that mean to you?
It means that you have an opportunity to connect with someone. It could be someone totally far and away. They're in the supply chain, they're in accounting, whatever. You can lead from anywhere in the organization and make a difference. And when what you hope to do is that you hope that as people move around the organization, they take those things with them. Whether it's, I saw something, I should do something about it, I should tell somebody. Or when someone says, hey, we can cut corners, that's not that big deal. Well, that they speak up and they say, actually, this is what it will do if you do that over time. And so I think it's an excellent way, especially for people that are just getting started. I mean, everybody to a certain degree wants to have some sort of notoriety, right? So they want to be seen to a certain degree. I think most of us do. I think it's a great way to do something that makes a difference and should impact their future as well.
How would you recommend someone just high level get started? Would it have helped you if you had a partner in that? Or is it better just to kind of start, see where it can grow from there more organically? Or what do you think are some of the best practices from that standpoint?
Well, it's a good question. I think it always helps, and you've mentioned mentors. It's always helpful to find a mentor. And some organizations are better than others about putting people together when they first start. Hey, you should really, like, you have a boss, but like, you should really talk to this person. They started 2 years ago. They've been here just a little bit longer, and so they have an idea as to how to navigate the organization and all the ins and outs. But I think it always helps when you talk about technology or you're bringing in new skills or something that's different. Like, any way to improve what the team is doing, and you find, hey, these are ways that we can make what we're doing more efficient. You're listening in meetings. You should be listening more than talking initially. That's my experience, and I still do that. And you should be trying to figure out where are the pain points. They keep mentioning they're frustrated about how the spreadsheet keeps breaking, or why isn't that they never respond, or so these are all these little pain points. If you start to work on these, like, you can just take one and say one that fits within your role and your capacity and your expertise because it's just easier, then just start to work at it and just experiment. And if you're within a team that is open to new ideas, just say, hey, I took a shot at this, take a look at it. Hey, I just came through this group, that there's someone starting in this other team. You said that there were some issues with this other team, like communicating. I was just in an onboarding group, and there's someone in that team that's just starting as well. Maybe I can work with them, and we can work together to try to bridge whatever communication issues or whatever the gaps are. Because if we don't work together, it's going to just make it more challenging for everyone.
And it's going to help that new person coming in over there that they're seeing problems with fresh eyes. I think that matters. When you're on the outside looking in, or maybe you're on the inside for the first time, your perspective on things is just a little different.
Yep.
Sometimes it's if things are bogged down, or a process is bogged down, or the order of things are the way they are. Maybe the reasons why they have to be like that. Or maybe there used to be, and we just haven't talked about, is that still efficient for the way we do business now? One of the things that I try to notice in my own work life is what elements, what processes are we touching multiple times?
Mm-hmm.
Or if we're having to have the same conversations over and over, is there some way to kind of streamline that in the process, in the supply chain process or something? Or anytime, if I've got this person over here talking about this and then there's somebody over here, if I can connect those two and make things easier for both of them, maybe they just need to talk to one another.
Exactly.
That's where I kind of try to find some of those opportunities for process improvement.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are all great points. Assuming you're in an organization that's open to you, in most cases they are. They're like, oh yeah, learn about what the business is like. And so you want to learn how all these pieces fit together, right? And how they interconnect. It takes this path to get to from A to B to C to all the way down until we have a finished product or whatever. That helps you, to your point, kind of see where those opportunities might be. It also will help you identify where there might be silos, which is a constant problem as companies change over time. It's constantly changing, and as those build up, you have to constantly try to break them down just so that you're operating as efficiently as possible.
Right. Yeah, I've jobs that I've had, companies I've been at in the past, people have gotten frustrated with me because I find myself asking why a lot. Why do we do it this way? Why do we do it a certain way? And just because I don't like inefficiencies, that's the part that kind of drives me. We're all way too busy to be doing things multiple ways or over and over again. I mean, if we're expected to be more productive, that doesn't just mean taking on more work, because at some point we meet maximum personal capacity,
Right.
or at least there's diminishing returns at least. So why not try to be more efficient as we can? What I really liked about what you said there in the intro was going to the end user with the construction guys first whenever you're figuring out change and making change, and then working backwards, I think is key to being able, it's that adoption of change. We can sit here all day long and talk about this needs to change or that, but they're going to have, everybody from here to there, honestly, is going to have a different perspective on why things need, or at least if they have a voice, they're going to offer you different perspectives of what they need in the process.
Yeah.
And not only will it be a better process, But because you've asked them their opinion, the likelihood of adoption is going to be incredibly higher because you've made them part of the decision making process.
Yeah, and that last part is key because I found, well, and certainly at certain levels of the organization, they're going to have to be involved in some sort of decision. But you get more buy-in, certainly, especially if you're trying to work with the team. And I used this example a lot with when I was working with field crews a lot years ago, is that you have to get the buy-in because they're just not going to go along with it. If they didn't have involvement, like if you talk about PPE or whatever, it could be gold plated and crusted with diamonds. Like, it doesn't matter if they didn't have an opportunity to use it, to try it out, to put it through the ringer, all that, then their opinion didn't matter to begin with. So you just went ahead, right? And so that's key. And you find that throughout the hierarchy of an organization. Sometimes it's just they want to know, like, their opinion matters, right?
Right. Otherwise, it just seems like another mandate.
Right, yeah.
And they don't necessarily see the value in it.
Yeah.
You also talk a lot about artificial intelligence, and that's kind of a common theme throughout some of your posts on LinkedIn and stuff too. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts on artificial intelligence are. Is that something that in your continuous improvement efforts in the organization that you're utilizing, or how does that factor into everything in the technology aspect, factor into what you're doing on a regular basis right now?
My organization is approaching it methodically, I would say. So I think not entirely ready to just jump in with both feet. It's more cautious. Obviously, I think with most operators, they're going to be particularly sensitive to whether it's personal or like personnel data or performance data or financial data or anything kind of getting either corrupted or released somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of our tools at this point are enterprise level tools that are just part of our enterprise operating system. And I think that my guess is that most organizations would be the same. We just talk about the integrity of like a gas control and monitoring system. They're particularly sensitive that if most CISOs already know that majority of the vulnerabilities are coming from internal employees, only because they click on the link or they're susceptible to phishing or whatever the case may be. I think that's still the case, and so that really kind of presents a challenge for an adoption of a particular product. I've used it personally, and that's really just some of that has been tinkering to see if I could come up with some solutions for the group. And so it's not like managing the group, but this would be, hey, here's a tool that if you're implementing or you're researching or you're automating, whatever the case may be, some aspect of your PSMS implementation. So it's really just, in one way, it's a way to get another piece of value out there, but it's also a way for me to learn and grow with the technology. Outside of that, it's been mostly like, how can I automate this process because it's really tedious, or I don't know anything about graphic design. How could I just iterate until I just come up with its prototype after prototype, just keep going until you get to like what you're looking for. And so some of that may be graphics for posts on LinkedIn, but all those, I mean, because I don't work in isolation, like all those ideas are certainly coming through my mind as I work. So I'm in the office and I'm thinking about how could this possibly help the organization.
Yep.
And so I'm hoping that at some point that kind of ability to rapidly iterate, which most organizations would love to adopt to a certain degree. You see it more in the more innovative spaces like the tech space where they're trying to stand up a product in 6 months. I mean, you'll be able to do that with AI tools.
Yeah, and it'll come. I think we have to be respectful of the security personnel's maybe apprehension or slow to adopt on that sort of thing. We have to make sure that they're comfortable with the level of accessibility that some of these tools have. I was talking to a friend the other day that is a IT director in his organization, and I was asking him about Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. You know, I mean, because there's different types of AI. There's the Chat GPT that's like an informational resource,
right.
And then there's a lot of the daily tools that we would use, like Microsoft Copilot, that integrates with your daily tasks to streamline things and make processes more efficient. And I said, what do you think about Copilot? Is that something that we should be looking into and playing with. I'm eager to do it, but then you're trying to be respectful of your own organization's security and stuff. He said, we've played around with it and I've looked into it. I've researched it. He said, us personally, we're just not yet comfortable with exactly what level of access it has to the data. It feels like there's just too much access to too much of our information right now that we're comfortable with, that it opens up too many bad scenarios. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really alluring. When you think about it from a project management standpoint, like, hey, I've got a 3-year project. I want to summarize all the notes, all the calls, all the everything, and do that without error or close to. I mean, obviously there's some hallucination aspects to some of the LLMs, but that is really alluring to have that capacity to look through just tons of data and different sources and emails and all that and just summarize things. And I agree, everything I've read and everyone I've talked to has said the same thing. They're just weary about what happens if you plug in like real data into something like this. Are you sure that it's not out there? And there's plenty of skeptics. Like, I'm totally kind of buying into this idea that on a small scale, if you want to do something and you really want to develop something kind of cool, is it might be worth learning all the skills to build your own small language model.
Yes.
Because you can actually train it the way you want to train it. It's not the data that the whatever organization, OpenAI or whoever's service, it's not their data, right? It's yours. It can be closed. And so that is a pretty...
The opportunity there, I think, is huge. And I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos on that. And especially with the Chat GPT 4.0 release, right, you can actually go in and create your own custom GPT. Let's say I wanted something to help write LinkedIn posts, and I type out all of the different leadership things that I write about on a regular basis and say, this is going to be your database.
Yeah.
Well, you can then go and pull other custom GPTs in and say, bring in content creator. And now you've got Alex Hermosi's marketing brain,
right,
that's writing here, and this and that. And you can bring in different GPTs. It's like having different experts sitting in the room with you. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there for us to, I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like from an organizational standpoint in the next couple of years, but there's people smarter than me that are more creative, that will figure out how to use those sorts of things for good within our organizations, whether it's emails or documentation or process changes and that sort of thing, and running there might be something that runs different simulations of process changes that you want to do in your organization. I don't know. I think it's really we're just on the cusp of it. And here, as we're recording on June 13th, just yesterday, didn't Apple have an announcement that OpenAI is going to be integrated into iOS 18 with the next release? Mm-hmm. What does that mean for security of data? I don't know.
Right. And a lot of organizations, and I'm sure a lot of operators out there are, because they tend to stick with one platform, is they're probably iOS platforms, like from a mobile standpoint. And so now they've got to think about, wait a minute, what are we dealing with now? Now do we have to all switch to Android?
And there was a time, I remember in my career, where I worked for an electric company back in the mid 2000s, maybe late, somewhere between 2010, when smartphones first came out.
Yeah.
There were several, Microsoft had one and several other companies had a smartphone. There was a Windows phone before the first iPhone. There were several years before our company even considered adoption of an iPhone because they were unsure. Nobody was familiar with the iOS platform because everything that we ran on was Microsoft. At an organizational level, at the enterprise level, everything you do is Microsoft based.
Right.
And so there were a lot of security concerns then, and they figured it out. We evolve. So I think it's going to be a good way for us to learn how to grow and adapt these technologies over time.
I think at all levels in all parts of the business, there are going to be benefits to implementing some sort of AI tool or based product. And hey, the good news is, particularly on the gas side, well, definitely still on the electric side, is that someone coming in and up, if they really want to stay as far away from that as possible, you still need to dig holes. So there's one thing that AI is not going to replace, and that's the people who have to put their hands on the product. And so with the infrastructure that we continue to upgrade at rapid pace, we will need people that are skilled in keeping their hands busy on the
Mm.
actual pipe or pole or wire or whatever.
And even in such a manual hands-on industry, if you are looking to continue to grow in your career, I've been noticing more and more there's always a technology angle to every industry. And with the advancements that we're seeing with the technology right now and how fast they're rapidly evolving, somebody that can figure out, they can get their hands on the technologies and learn that and stay up to speed, and then figure out how to be that change maker in your organization, whether it's just as an advisor or to step up, going back to bringing that full circle,
Yep.
step up and say, hey, this is what I've been doing, researching on the side. This is where I think that it would be beneficial for us. That's really putting yourself out there. And I think that there's good opportunity for someone looking to take the lead on the technology side in the future.
Yeah, because of resource constraints over the years, I've had to learn more about SQL and databases and building out different models and that sort of thing than I ever thought I would. And it doesn't mean that I want to spend every day doing that because that's not my jam, but it helps a lot because often you're going to be invited into those discussions where you have a good view or operational experience with a certain thing, and you can intersect that with a whole nother team. You probably appreciate that from a project management standpoint, where you've got the business over on one side and they're speaking different languages. The more you can do that, to your point, for someone who's relatively new, even if you have that experience, then you will more likely be invited into that room. And so then it goes back to that point of learning how the business operates. You can still stay in your track, like your niche. You can become an expert in your particular area, or you can move around the organization. But either way, having that insight on, oh, this is why they do that, or this is actually the process for that. I've seen that, or we can actually solve that with this particular tool or whatever, or I know who to talk to. Those people are invaluable. They're always going to be invited into those rooms.
That is a career skill I think that will never die. Being that connector, being that the bridge builder, if
Yep.
you will. If nothing else, just say, hey, you need to go talk to this person because I don't have the answer, but I know that they do. And that goes back to the interpersonal. You only know that person has the answer whenever you've breaking down those departmental silos and you've gone and talked to them and you understand, at least understand their language, even if you can't speak their language.
Yeah.
And all that comes back to change management too. It's more on the communication side. You do a lot from the process side and from the operations side in terms of that. But yeah, I think that's huge. I appreciate it. Appreciate the time. The way you've grown, even in your company now, I think is really cool, just showing the value that you bring. If you, let's say 16 years ago, you've been in your organization 16 years. If you were to go back either that time that you started or let's say your 30-year-old self, and we'll close with this and I'll give you the final word of where people can find you. What would you tell your 30-year-old self about your career advice, direction, maybe what not to do?
One of the big lessons I've learned over the years is that you can't assume that it's someone else's fault for something not working. I think in my case, it's not like I'm going to take blame for everything, but what I'm saying is I am responsible for the outcome. Regardless of what happens, if it didn't work out the way it should have, I am super critical about what was my influence in that situation. And was there anything else I could have done to change the outcome? And if there was, then I should try to improve that next time I get into that situation. Instead of saying, oh, it's their problem. It's like talking to a group and you're not getting any feedback, right? And you're just saying, well, they just don't want to hear it. They're just not engaged. Well, maybe you just haven't figured out how to engage with them. And so it's putting it back on yourself. Again, this is about not saying it's someone else's problem. It's saying I should be doing something else. So it's changing your inflection. It's the context of the situation until you find that path, because you're going to talk to people from all different walks of life, from different perspectives. They're having bad days. They're having good days. They think that you don't care, whatever the case may be. And you need to somehow connect with them. Back to your point about making connections, is that is another invaluable skill. Like you just being able to say, I can do something about this. Like if they are not on board yet, then there's got to be a way I can do it hopefully without just ultimately saying, mandating that you will be kind of on board. I think that's a huge thing, no matter what you're doing, is just always taking that ownership and saying, what else could I do? Was there something about the way I phrased those words or the particular words I used? Was I using too big of words? Was I not speaking to their level? Whatever the case may be, being fluid and being able to change based on your audience, whether it's you're speaking to a group, you're working with a team, I think that's super important. And that means you have to be super aware of how you are in the moment, how you present yourself, how you respond, your body language, everything. The inflection, again, the tonality and all that stuff, it all goes into your final product. And not just saying, if someone had a bad day, well, forget them, like I don't need to work with them again. Well, maybe you should just try. Maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe you should just try a little harder and reach out and let it go. Beyond that, it's really just, my experience is that and nowadays, especially with LinkedIn is probably a good example, is organizations are always changing. At the end of the day, you can have great teams and they can almost be your family potentially, but odds are you will have a life outside of your organization. You will probably also have a profession outside of your organization. And so you have to be aware that it goes beyond those walls, that all of your credibility, all of the credentials, everything that you earned, your reputation is yours and it goes with you. So if you find yourself in an organization that isn't supportive of your path or your growth or what you want to do, in the short term, you can just get involved in the industry. You can get involved in a trade association with a group, whatever the case. You can start one of your own. In the long term, you can find a place that's better. So I think people need to be okay with not only sticking it out if they just think it's learning the organization, but they also need to know that they need to protect their own future. And by that, it's like, hey, I am bigger than just these four walls, right? I have something to do and I have something to say, and I have a contribution that goes well beyond my organization. I think that will only help the industry as a whole. And in the end, it will protect them because, at the end of the day, it's a business contract. You agree to do work, they agree to pay you. And there are organizations that from time to time find themselves with cutting staff, reorganizing whatever, and you may find yourself that you're like, okay, it's not the best fit for me anymore.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, man. LinkedIn, the best place to find you, I presume, if you're in and around the oil and gas industry at all, whether industry professional, utility, pipeline, anyone, few and far between, encourage you to check out the Pipeline Management Systems Group, the PSMS, on LinkedIn. That should take you right to it while you search that. Have all the contact information in the show notes as well. And thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Building Blocks podcast. If you found anything beneficial from today, I would appreciate you reaching out and letting me know on LinkedIn. I'm always looking for ways to add value to the listeners and interviewing leaders in our industry. If you found this helpful, I would appreciate if you leave us a review and reach out to me on LinkedIn and give me some feedback. In addition, if you know someone that would be good for an interview, please let me know and I'd be happy to connect with them. You can find myself and any of the other guests on LinkedIn, where we continue the conversations about leadership, careers, growth, and development.